Your ancestors believed that mirror could steal your soul. And the terrifying part is, they might not have been entirely wrong. You caught your own reflection this morning in a bathroom mirror and didn't think twice about it. You adjusted your hair. You checked your teeth. You moved on with your day. But for most of human history, that same simple glance would have terrified you. Not because mirrors were rare, because of what people believed they actually did. Here's the strange part. Across dozens of unrelated cultures, separated by oceans and thousands of years, with no contact with each other whatsoever, the same belief kept showing up again and again. A reflection wasn't just an image. It was a piece of you, temporarily outside your body, vulnerable to being taken. An anthropologist named James Frazer spent years cataloging beliefs like this across hundreds of societies, from the Andaman Islands to parts of Africa to indigenous communities in the Americas. And he found the same patterns surfacing independently, over and over. Many cultures treated a reflection, and by extension a shadow, as something closely tied to the soul itself. Damage the reflection, and you might damage the person. Trap the reflection somewhere, and you might trap a piece of them along with it. This wasn't a fringe superstition held by a handful of isolated tribes. It was close to a universal human instinct. So why would your ancestors, independently, all around the world, land on the exact same fear? To understand that, you have to go back to a version of yourself that had almost no experience with clear reflections at all. For the overwhelming majority of human history, the only reflective surface available to you was still water. Not a smooth, polished mirror, a pond, a puddle, a dark, wavering surface that shows you a face, but never a stable one. Wind ripples it. A fish disturbs it. Your own breath distorts it. The reflection flickers, breaks apart, and reassembles. Now imagine seeing that for the first time with no scientific explanation for optics or light. You lean over still water and something looks back at you. It moves when you move. It has your face, but it lives somewhere else, somewhere just beneath the surface, in a world you can't fully reach. That is not a comforting experience. That's the first horror movie your species ever watched, and you were the main character. There's a reason young children still sometimes react to mirrors with genuine unease before they fully understand what's happening. A psychologist named Gallup Jr. designed a now-famous experiment to test which animals actually recognize themselves in a mirror at all, placing a small mark on an animal's face and watching whether it reached toward the mark on its own body or reacted to the mirror as if it were a stranger. Human toddlers typically don't pass this test until somewhere around 18 months old. Before that age, the reflection genuinely reads, at some level, as another creature entirely. Your ancestors didn't have 18 months to slowly grow into understanding optics. They had a lifetime of staring into water, seeing something that behaved like them but wasn't fully controllable, and building belief systems to explain the unease that never quite went away. Once actual polished mirrors started appearing, first as pieces of obsidian, later as polished bronze and metal, the fear didn't disappear. It intensified. A clearer reflection wasn't more comforting. It was more convincing. In several documented cultures, covering mirrors during moments tied to death became a widespread practice, one that still exists today in some traditions. The underlying logic was strikingly consistent across completely unrelated societies. A soul newly departing the body was thought to be disoriented, vulnerable, possibly still lingering nearby. A mirror in the room created a risk. The departing soul might see its own reflection, become confused about which version was real, and become trapped inside the glass instead of moving on. Covering every reflective surface in a house of mourning wasn't decoration. It was believed to be protection, for the dead and for the living standing beside them. Notice what's actually happening in that belief. Humans weren't just afraid of mirrors in the abstract. They were afraid of a very specific moment. The moment identity itself feels unstable, and a reflection becomes a second version of you that might not fully be under your control. That fear, it turns out, never fully went away. It just changed shape. Think about the last time you caught an unexpected glimpse of yourself. Maybe in a dark window at night, maybe in a security camera monitor, Maybe in a mirror you forgot was there in an unfamiliar room. There's a specific flicker of unease in that moment, a half-second where your brain isn't sure if it's looking at you or at someone else entirely. Psychologists sometimes describe this reaction using the concept the philosopher and psychoanalyst Sigmund Freud called the uncanny, the deeply unsettling feeling produced by something that is almost exactly familiar, but not quite. A reflection sits right at that boundary, close enough to be you, different enough, in that split second of surprise, to not feel fully like you. You've probably also experienced the more specific version of this that happens with photographs and video. Most people, when they hear a recording of their own voice for the first time, react with something close to discomfort. That's not vanity. That's the same ancient instinct, dressed in modern technology. A version of you exists outside your control, and some old circuit in your brain still isn't entirely sure that's safe. This is where the story gets genuinely strange, because it suggests something about how deeply your brain is wired to treat identity as something fragile, something that can exist in more than one place at once, and something worth protecting from duplication. Consider how much of modern life, still, quietly, echoes this exact anxiety. People feel a genuine flicker of discomfort seeing an unflattering photo of themselves online, one that circulates outside their control. Deepfake technology triggers a level of visceral unease that goes beyond ordinary misinformation concerns, tapping into something that feels almost primal, the horror of a version of you doing and saying things the real you never did. Even the simple act of avoiding your own reflection during a difficult emotional moment, turning away from the bathroom mirror after crying, isn't really about vanity either. It's an old instinct doing exactly what it always did, treating a destabilized version of your identity as something you'd rather not confront directly. Your ancestors didn't have a word for the uncanny. They didn't have psychology or optics or mirror self-recognition experiments. What they had was a lifetime of staring into water and glass, watching a version of themselves behave just independently enough to feel like a separate, fragile thing, worth protecting. So the next time you glance in the mirror without a second thought, notice what you're actually doing. You're looking directly at something your ancestors spent tens of thousands of years treating as dangerous, covering during grief, and avoiding during moments they felt most vulnerable. Tonight, when you catch your reflection in a dark window, and don't think twice about it, you won't feel like you're staring down an ancient fear. But somewhere underneath that glance, your ancestors are still flinching.